So yeah, great minds think alike.
What ideas, right? Among all the companies.
All right.
Okay.
You guys ready?
So.
Okay, we're hold on. Are we ready?
Yeah.
We're ready.
I don't think I need to present the company anymore. So, hi everyone, my name is Gaspard Primez. Thank you very much for being here today. So, let me introduce myself. So, I'm 24 years old, I am from Belgium, and I am your Chief Innovation Officer. Now that we are all acquainted with each other, let me tell you a personal story. When I was 3 years old, well, I don't remember, but that's what my parents told me, I started to develop what is called sub-spaz. For those of you who doesn't know it, it's when the child is really, really angry, start to cry, contract his muscles, and then stop breathing, turn red, and in my case, my eyes will go backwards like this. So it was pretty scary, especially for a parent who experienced this for the first time. Now, then a few years later, when I was 13 years old, I started big time for me, high school. I'm sure you all remember your first time in high school, so first year, new school. Then I cannot say I hated that school, no, but I was not a huge fan either. You know, I missed my old school, I missed my old friends. And then a few months went by, I started to blend in, make some friends, and then someday, out of the blue, in my English class with Miss Nancy, I started to have a weird sensation in my chest, like someone was trying to crush it like this. And I have trouble breathing, and I was like this close to pass out. So I didn't thought it was a big deal at the end, but then a few months later, I was jogging jogging in the woods, and I had the same symptoms. So pain in the chest, and trouble breathing, and almost passing out. Now, after talking to my mom and a therapist, I realized I was developing anxiety and panic attack. So for me, it was not that big a deal because it was small attacks, a few plants medicine and a therapy, 1 or 2 therapy sessions later, I was fine. So you can say I was lucky, but not everyone is. I mean, you remember Michael's story, and a friend of mine, for example, after months and months of therapy, he had to be dropped out of school, and he ended up being home tutored. So it took 1 year, but in the end he went back to school. And to this day, I don't even know why I was having this attack. Why? Was it because I was stressed, needed attention? I don't know, I couldn't say, even for my friends. We were not that unhappy kids, we were not mistreated or anything, you know, we were not in a stressful environment. But anxiety and panic attack have so many different causes. It can be the death of a family, it can be a stressful environment, anything can trigger it. It can be also a physical condition that you don't even know you have. So in my case, yes, I was lucky, but sometimes the consequence can be so terrible. You can have depressions, socialization, and sometimes suicide. Thank you.
So yeah, there's many more people just like Gaspard and his friend. And in fact, there's 44.7 million adults in the US who experience some form of mental illness. 44.7 million. That is 1 out of 5 adults in the US with some form of mental illness. And usually it forces them to alter their lives in some way to be able to better cope. So, but not all of them receive treatment actually. In fact, only half of the people who suffer from mental illness actually go and get treated. And those who don't get treatment not only have a huge effect on themselves and on their family, but also on the economy as a whole. In fact, in the US, every single year, $200 billion gets wasted because people have untreated medical conditions, mental conditions. So yeah, but this seems secondary if you look at the personal effects, if you look at the family, and in fact, if the medical disease is serious enough and gets untreated for too long, it can even result in serious effects like Gaspard said, like suicide. Suicide in the US is the 10th leading cause of death, and for the age group from 10 to 34, the 2nd leading cause of death. So we become a big threat to ourselves today. In fact, homicide ranks lower in all age groups than suicide. So for the first time in human history, we're living in the world where we're more likely to kill ourselves than get killed by another person.
But so, what's cure anxiety? CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is one of the most successful ways to cure anxiety that treat the patient, the skill and the technique to overcome the fearful situation. Exposure therapy is one technique that is really powerful to overcome the situation. Let me tell you my personal story. When I was at high school, I was literally afraid of big dogs. And guess what? My best friends had a big dog. His name was Billy. And every time Billy was around, I was literally panicking and unable to do anything. But little by little, being exposed to Billy, touching him almost every day, I gained the confidence, and at the end I even was able to play with him. Usually it's how exposure therapy works. The therapist put the patient gradually to the fearful situation, and they also learn the technique and how to manage the stress. There are three main types of exposure therapy. One is imaginal, when you imagine the situation in your head. The second one is in vivo exposure, when you have a real life scenario and actually you feel the real situation. The third one is the virtual one, when it's a combination of the past two, but unfortunately you can really have the experience of a real situation. Exposure is definitely better than medicine because you work on yourself and also you develop self-awareness. So if exposure therapy empowers us so much, why we don't integrate this into our everyday life?
So yes, this is actually our goal. We want to bring exposure to the next level. Okay, now today therapists understand that exposing people to their fears is important. That's why they go to virtual technology, using virtual technology to make them exposed to fears. But this is not enough. We want them to actually live the experience, feel the environment, see how it is, make it real. So that's what we want to do. And today, it's going to be possible actually in 2030, because today, the brain-computer interface is evolving at a very fast pace. After many years of studying the brain of the patients, we start understanding what are the signals that triggers when you move your hand, when you feel fear, when you taste something. And they translate it today in digital. And digital, what is digital? Is a language that computer can understand. And thanks to that, today we see cases of these, for instance, gamers playing video games without touching even the screen or anything. Just by thinking, they can move the character in the environment. They can make them do actions. But it goes also all the way around. The computer understands you, knows which part of your brain they should trigger to make you feel something, to make you see something. And today, we see devices that actually make blind people see again. These glasses that you put in your head, the camera sees the environment, and when it sees red, it's gonna make your brain, part of the brain trigger red, and you will see red. A mountain, you will see a mountain. Same thing for words. So, therapists already created this environment for certain cases of anxiety. They have the space, but one thing that is missing in this environment is the feeling of it. So we need right now to take patients in this real environment, analyze their brain, and see how it feels when they touch a table, when they touch the ground, how they feel, and implement that in the program. So by doing so, we will be able, with a simple helmet, the patient will be in the sofa with the therapist next to him and live his fears. And the therapist will be here to say, this is okay. We don't want to go for ethical questions. We don't want to go for an invasive brain-computer interface. We don't want people with chips in their brain and giving the opportunity to all people to hack people. This is for security reasons. Also, I think it's great that AI is great, but we want to keep this human touch. We want the therapist to be next to the patient and say, this is okay. And finally, by doing so, it'll be also easier for us to control the data, because we care about you. We don't want your data to be spread all around the world.
All right, thanks, Alfonso. So, as Alfonso has mentioned, we believe that BCI will be the next technology to revolutionize the anxiety disorder treatments. But before I tell you how we come up with that vision, I have to tell you why is it important for us to have that. So, Sophie has mentioned that mental disorders has caused impact on the society and the economy. Last year, Americans spent approximately $240 billion on these types of therapies. Federica also has told us that one of the techniques to treat these kinds of disorders are exposure treatments. Even though it's very effective, it came with a price. So imagine the first scenario of claustrophobia, for instance. The simulation will be relatively easier because I can bring it to the elevator, for instance, and you got simulation. But now imagine if for post-war soldiers, imagine for people that has anxiety each and every time they want to board the plane. And during these times, virtual reality, VR, is seen as the technology that will break through to help treat this kinds of disorders. Because VR allows for an inexpensive approach and the possibility of constructing exposure that may be difficult to implement. And however, the most annoying things about VR, first, is that, I know this sounds silly, but glitches. Glitches often happen when we do simulation. And second, the limitation is that it's just a simulation. It doesn't really hit the specific targets of the brain. On the other hand, BCI, now we see the application is not as wide as we may see in the future. Now, the application of BCI is limited to neuromuscular disorders, for instance, spinal cord injury or stroke. But even so, we've seen the potential that BCI can offer. As Alfonso has mentioned, BCI are able to make blind people see again. And now we can also see people controlling the computer without even physically touching it. All of these remarkable advances are possible because the BCI devices are able to transmit or receive any kinds of signal and send it to a specific part of the brain, in this context called the amygdala, which is part of the brain where it triggers anxiety. So this is why we believe that BCI will be the next breakthrough in terms of in the mental disorder therapies. Will we be able to completely eradicate? I don't think so. But we believe by combining advanced technology and the masteries of the therapist, we will be able to provide a better anxiety treatments. Thus, by going forward with this technology, we will revolutionize the way how mental disorders are treated. Thank you.
Thank you.